Hello everybody, and welcome to an extremely autumnal detail diatribe. I am your presenter for the day, Red. I have my pumpkin mug with pumpkin spice tea in it, and I'll tell you, it basically tastes like slightly spiced water. So we're off to a roaring start.
And I'm just along for the ride. You are showing me through this new and whimsical world. I'm just a soft little idiot who has no idea what we're going to do. Classic Dante and Virgil dynamic here.
You know it, baby. We got the color palettes reversed, but we're ready to go. Yes, so I've talked about this subject a couple times. I'm not sure if it made it onto the channel in any official capacity, but the thesis we're discussing today is the fantastically weird little show Over the Garden Wall. Came out in 2014, a soft 11 years ago. Creator Patrick McHale recently co-wrote the screenplay for Del Toro's Pinocchio, which is fun. It's nice to know he's still writing extremely weird, spooky shit.
Yeah.
Love that shit. And it's just 10 little 10-minute episodes of very Halloween-y vibes, sort of very autumnal, very folkloric, sort of a complicated mix of aesthetics that turns into one very fun little adventure. Completely bite-sized. For years now, my Halloween tradition has just been hanging out with friends and rewatching this bad boy, including one year where the friends both dressed up as Greg and Wirt, which I thought was very charming.
I think I remember you sending me a picture of that, yeah.
My Halloween costume game has gotten significantly more subdued, but I was wearing my Nightwing jacket, which meant technically I was a bluebird, so it all kind of worked out.
Let us recall the time that we were hanging out one Halloween in high school, and I showed up not having actually worn a costume. I just had jeans and a kind of teal shirt. So you looked at me and it's like, what's your costume? And I looked down at myself and I said, I'm Steve from Minecraft.
Yes, crucial context is that I was fully dressed as a pirate at the time, which really enhances the absurdity of what are you dressed as? But yes, Halloween, by far my favorite holiday. It's a different thing to celebrate when you're not of trick-or-treating age, and I'm still finding my way through these complicated, tangled woods. But the show Over the Garden Wall is, as I said, 10 episodes, 10 minutes each, and about the second or third time I watched it, I was like, hey, wait a minute, are we perhaps doing a Dante's Inferno with this bad boy? And the more I looked at it, the more I was like, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm onto something with this. Then I did other stuff for 10 years, and a couple other people also noticed this, so now there's a few articles, there's I think a couple video essays about this. I have stalwartly averted my gaze. I haven't watched any of those. This is straight off the dome, baby. I am just talking about what I observed from the show because I think this is really fun. Sometimes it's just fun for me to pull a thread and see how much of a show that thread actually consists of.
I really do love the way you contextualize this, because when I wrote my thesis on Cavafy, the Greek Alexandrian poet, I found it so obnoxious having to dig through secondary sources and everybody else's opinions. It's like, I just want to talk about the text. I'm not here to figure out what people in the 80s were yelling at each other about. I want to read the poetry. I'm just going to the source. So I like that your angle here is we're talking about Dante and we're talking about this. I don't give a shit what anybody else says.
Yes.
That doesn't matter.
No, I'm here for the two primary sources, Dante's Divine Comedy and Over the Garden Wall by Patrick McHale. I do have a full summary of the Inferno. It's just from 8+ years ago, so it's definitely perhaps not to the degree of fidelity and accuracy that I like in my videos nowadays, but I do have.
You are catastrophically new to the channel.
Yes, and also we did a college Inferno video where we were what are the punishments of being a bad student in college as the circles of hell, which was also very goofy and fun.
Yes.
But yeah, so this is not our first foray into the Inferno on the channel. It's an old friend at this point, but we are giving it the more granular treatment. First things first, let's hit up the opening of the Inferno. Full disclosure, while I did reread the Inferno for this, any part where Dante was just arguing with somebody who he knew in real life, I skipped over it. So, I have all the important world building from the Inferno, but Dante's personal burn book, that's less of interest to me.
Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritornai nella bosca oscura e la vita vera era smarrita.
I have to know.
No, I don't have an Italian version. Damn it, okay, I might have gotten that wrong.
I was there's better than even odds you've just pulled it off the shelf just to do that, but...
No, I don't have an Italian copy with me. Wait, no, I do, hold on.
Okay,
wait.
Please hold.
Pause,
everybody. I'm doing the fucking Chris Pratt Raptors hands thing right now to get it. Hold.
Let's see. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai, per una selva oscura e la diritta via era smarrita. I was close.
Nice. And I've retained...
Some of the Tuscan handles the verbs a little differently. Or also, cammin instead of cammina. They don't... This is not what this detailed diatribe is about.
No,
Move on.
We're doing a full Italian audiobook of Dante's Inferno in the middle of it, just for real immersion. So, the short of it, at the beginning of Dante's Inferno, Dante basically enters the story lost in a scary dark wood, not really sure how he got there. He tries to leave, but is harried by 3 beasts, final and most significant, a terrifying wolf. Just while he's about to give up all hope and get really distressed, the ghost of his favorite historical poet, Virgil, appears and says, "Hey, I've been sent to guide you by Beatrice, who may or may not be the Beatrice that Dante Alighieri knew in real life once."
Once.
And then she died young.
Once.
And he was like, "Oh, it's so cruel how the most beautiful and pure amongst us are taken to heaven early while I have to sit around here." And anyway, so Virgil is like, "Listen, Buster Brown, bad news. You can't get out of the woods by getting past that scary dog, so we're gonna have to go into the woods and all the way through. But don't worry, I'm here to guide you. We're gonna get all the way through hell and then out the other side, and it's gonna be great."
I love the implied logic of one dog is too much. We're going to actual full hell.
She's a really scary dog, okay?
They go to see Cerberus!
Yeah, but in this version, Cerberus is just like a demon guy or whatever. I don't fucking know.
He is truly just there,
Just a guy. Because Dante has his like special visitor's pass, so all the demons know to like not fuck with him.
Yeah, it's in the haunted house rules. You're not allowed to actually touch the
right.
people in the
We're so lucky that Dante's like fear response is passing out and not fight, because like the minute he decks one of those guys in the Malibolge, all bets are off.
That's why they have good insurance for those haunted house rides.
Yeah, exactly. So Dante and Virgil enter the gates of hell together under the inscription that is generally translated as "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And basically right on the inside, the boatman Charon, a terrifying old dude, tells Dante to get the hell out of here because he's not dead enough to hang out with the cool kids, but he's in it for the long haul. Episode 1 of Over the Garden Wall, the old grist mill. Wirt and Greg, our 2 protagonists, enter the story lost in a scary dark forest, unsure of how they got there, which will be a plot point we come back to later. They are warned of the beast and are attacked by a terrifying mutant dog wolf thing. Turns out to be a completely normal dog that ate an evil turtle. The boys meet their guide, Beatrice the Bluebird, but promptly reject her offers to guide them, and takes her another couple episodes of getting good with them. The beast is described as the death of hope, in those exact words, and the woodsman, a terrifying old man, voiced by Uncle Fester from the Addams Family movies, tells them to leave the woods and beware the beast. So I've just got a little like box here that we'll see on all these episodes, just to tick all the major parallels. Wirt is a poet in a stupid looking red hat, so that's our Dante parallel right there.
Pretty stupid hat.
It's a very stupid hat. Both of the hats are differently stupid, but they are both stupid red hats. They're lost in a dark forest, there's a big fucked up wolf thing, their guide ultimately is Beatrice, while Virgil is the one guiding Dante through the Inferno. He's there on Beatrice's directions. There is no hope allowed in the scary dark woods, and there's a scary old guy. So we're off to a roaring start, baby.
Something man versus wolf. It's like, would you rather run into a man or a bear in the woods?
Oh, hell. Dante would literally choose the entirety of hell over a single wolf in the woods. So, Canto number 4, Dante and Virgil roll up on Limbo, which is sort of the suburban part of hell. It's not actually part of hell proper. These people aren't being tormented. However, they are not allowed to go anywhere else but hell, because most of them were born before Jesus was invented. So, as proposed by Dante, a profoundly unfair world that they are all living in, where just by having the misfortune of having existed before God's favorite princess and the luckiest boy in the world gets born, they get consigned to limbo, which isn't the worst, but it's, you're still deprived of the light of God, is the way it's framed.
The retroactive sainthood policy is very restrictive.
Yes. But this does give Dante an opportunity to hang out with all of his other favorite dead poets. So Virgil introduces Dante to all the cool kids, and they all tell him he's extremely cool and dope. But yeah, the circle, technically a circle of hell, but it's pretty chill, because these guys didn't actually do anything wrong. So they're mostly just kind of languishing forever, which admittedly does sound, functionally speaking, just as bad. But hey, whatever. They're all having a nice time. This is the circle that Virgil is in most of the time when he's not out giving Dante the world tour, because Virgil also has done nothing wrong ever in his entire life, except being born a scant 40 years before Big J. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Episode 2 of Over the Garden Wall, Hard Times at the Huskin Bee. Beatrice the Bluebird is back. She wants to help guide them through the woods to this specific person that she wants them to meet, Adelaide of the Pasture, the good woman of the woods. Wirt says no thank you. He doesn't trust strange birds in the woods. They're looking for a civilization, and they find a town called Pottsfield. Turns out to be a ghost town in more than one sense of the word. The population is a surprise they are entirely skeletons. They're all wearing pumpkins and like festive harvest outfits. This is less of a twist when you learn that a potter's field is the name for a graveyard of unnamed and unknown dead. And despite being very unsettling and very spooky, this town is completely chill. It's actually fine. Our heroes are free to leave after digging up their last 2 skeleton friends. There's a couple jokes about like, oh, aren't you a little early to be here? And then like, oh, don't worry, you'll join us someday. So like,
yeah, that's what they say when they leave, right?
Yeah. It's like, are you sure you don't want to stay and enjoy our lovely festival? Oh well, you'll join us someday. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
So obviously the parallels here are pretty solid. Friendly, harmless dead people. This is a liminal space on the outskirts of the actually rough stuff, and everything is fine here. The Pottsfield is nice. There's nothing really wrong with it.
Yeah. They're all having fun.
They're all having a good time. They're throwing a nice party. So back in the Inferno, Kanto number 5 is the Circle of Lust, circle number 2. Minos is here judging everyone who enters the second circle and determining what deeper circle they belong in. The punishment of the second circle is that it's beset by endless raging windstorms that carry the shades of the dead along them. The people in this circle are carnal sinners, but this is more broadly expanded beyond just like crimes of lust. It basically just means anyone who lets their passion and their emotion overwhelm their logic to commit crimes of passion.
The punishment for this circle is you have to read everyone else's slash fic and see how embarrassing it makes you look for having written your own.
Oh no! Oh man.
Everyone just passes it one to the right. It's like, oh man, really? What?
Pain. No, this song's passed along. This is also song. Anyway, so meanwhile, episode 3 of Over the Garden Wall, Schooltown Follies. The boys stumble on a schoolhouse in the middle of the woods. Wirt settles in for class as part of a character rebellion against Beatrice, who's making fun of him for being too much of a rules follower, not really driven enough by his passions and whims, and just kind of content to do whatever. Out of spite, he decides to do whatever he's told for the rest of the episode to show what it actually looks like when he does that, which is very funny. Now, the main thing of this episode is that the schoolmarm, despite doing her best to focus on teaching her classroom full of adorable animals, by the way, none of these animals talk, and they all, like, look and move like normal animals. They're just, like, they've been put in adorable little outfits. So, the whole concept of this school is that they are trying to teach animals how to, like, read and write, but these are fully just normal-ass animals.
Yeah.
Which is very charming. But the schoolmarm is having trouble focusing because she is beset by romantic and personal dramas on all fronts. Her no-good two-timing man has gone and run out on her. The school is threatening closure from not enough funds, not to mention that wild gorilla on the loose. So it's just it's a lot. She's got a lot going on. Very hard for her to concentrate on teaching when she's got all these complex dramas in her life. Our heroes save the day, unravel the drama. To save the school, they're gonna have to throw the best concert this woods has ever seen.
This is the most Phineas and Ferb-ass plotline of the entire show.
Oh, it absolutely is, yeah. So our heroes bring some wild emotional fun to a place of cold logic. The Inferno parallels, calling this the Circle of Lust is a little bit silly because it's very overblown romantic and personal drama, like season 17 of something that's been going on too long type thing. But this is all about relationship drama. I'd say it constitutes. And more broadly, there's the overarching theme of emotional indulgence versus cold rationality, what with the schooling being disrupted by all the yada yada. Anyway, yeah, this is probably the first step where you're like, oh yeah, there's themes here. There's parallels.
Yeah.
Next Kanto, next circle, it's the Circle of Gluttony, where Kerberos harries the dead, but like everyone else interesting in this book, Kerberos is reimagined as just a demon who is just a guy. So this is the realm of gluttony, where the dead souls languish in the mud under the unending rain and hail. Welcome to Songs of the Dark Lantern. It's raining like crazy. Our heroes escape by finding a tavern. There's a big shaggy dog that briefly blocks the tavern door, but he's just kind of chilling. Throughout the episode, Greg is focused on food. He's very hungry, but he never gets the chance to eat, visibly, any of the many huge piles of food he gets. Every time we see him, he's bringing another big plate to the table. The next time we see it, the plate is empty, but he's still hungry. So like, what the fuck is happening? Who even knows? The main focus of the episode is all the wacky tavern goers, because they're all basically obsessed with identity. They've all defined themselves as their role. It's like, oh, here's the tailor, here's the chef, the patisserie, and here's the tavern keeper. And they're all like, well, who's this Wirt guy? Who is he? And initially they think he's the young lover, but then they change their mind and they're like, oh, you're a pilgrim on a sacred journey, which sounds very familiar. And we get a little bit more world building about the beast, the woods. We learn that the dreaded beast preys on those who are lost in the woods and turns them into trees and then burns them for fuel in his dark lantern, which is some like classic Grimm's fairy tale bullshit, and I really like it.
Yeah, I really like that aesthetically. The way this show operates is kind of the three-part mixture of like American autumn aesthetics, Dante, and the Grimm's fairy tale overlayer. It's
Yes.
all three of those together. Not that other places don't have autumn, but it's a very like American coded with
Yes.
Pumpkins and junk like that.
We will get to that actually, but yes.
It's specifically all three of those elements together is what makes it what it is.
Yes, very much so. We get a little bit more about the woodsman as well, because when we first met him, he was intimidating, but seemed to be broadly helpful. Like, our heroes were very afraid of him, but he didn't do anything to harm them. He just seemed very distressed when the grist mill was destroyed. But we learned that everyone in this tavern is terrified of that guy, because they're like, hey, whoever has the dark lantern must be the beast. So that woodsman, you can't trust him. He's definitely the beast. We also learned that the woodsman is working with the beast to keep the dark lantern lit, because the beast has told him that the woodsman's daughter's soul is trapped inside it. So there's layers of this. This is an interesting departure from the Inferno structure, because while the framing device of this episode, in the tavern, the obsession with food, is very much third circle gluttony coded, all of this stuff about the woodsman and the beast and the dark lantern, this is very folkloric in a completely tonally distinct way. But we can tick off the Inferno parallels: big driving rainstorm, Kerberos to big old dog, the huge piles of food that nobody gets to eat is more thematically online with the gluttony circle rather than being in the gluttony circle itself. Our red-hatted poet hero is a pilgrim on a sacred journey, and the beast is a liar who rules/haunts this place and deals in lost souls, so we'll get back to him later. Next canto, Avarice. Plutus, the Roman god of wealth, is obviously reimagined as a demon here, and he guards the fourth circle, which is about greed and avarice and all that jazz. This is the circle of overspending, underspending, overall obsession with wealth and money. It's funny that it's both overspending and underspending, that like miserliness and overindulgence are both bad. Really gotta walk that tightrope.
It's very Aristotelian in how it's conceived, because his whole idea of ethics is like there's a mean, there's an average of the thing that you should do, and any quality in deficit or in excess is bad. So if you follow the rules and behave justly, that's great. If you don't behave justly, you're just rule breaking. If you behave too justly, you're a stuck-up asshole who uses the rules as a cudgel for people.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of stuff that would have naturally found its way into, through the classical canon, Dante's conception of hell. So it seems weird on the face of it, but actually completely tracks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, moderation in all things is the tenet of almost every form of spiritualism and religion in the world, because it is generally a good idea. But the shades in this circle are punished by being trapped in senseless conflicts with each other, rolling boulders in opposite directions around a giant circular track and making no forward progress. So in this episode, everything is all about the money. An outrageously wealthy and deeply unhinged man believes his manor is haunted by a beautiful ghost. It turns out that the ghost is a different outrageously wealthy person. Their two lavish, enormous mansions have been built so ridiculously huge that they've managed to connect together, and neither of them are aware of this, so they keep accidentally ending up in each other's houses, and then the other one is like, oh my god, a ghost! Also, the boys have a talking horse now, don't worry about it. Beatrice tells the boys that to reach Adelaide, they need exactly 2 pennies to pay the ferry. Super good sign. Always great when your transportation costs exactly 2 pennies. Nothing to worry about. And we get a little more backstory on Beatrice, who tells Wirt that she's doing all of this to try and uncurse herself and her family, who have all been turned into bluebirds because of her, which is another very folk tale, Grimm's fairy tales kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Inferno parallels in this episode are also baked into the theme. The ludicrous wealth in every conceivable dimension. Our extremely rich Quincy Endicott is very, very obsessed with all of his money and all of his absolutely lavish piles and gobs of money, and the two uber wealthy rich people are unknowingly working at odds with each other, which fits the structure of this circle of hell in the Inferno. And this isn't really in the Inferno, but it is very classic underworld coding that the toll for the ferry is exactly 2 pennies, so I threw that in there with a little question mark, because
we can imagine that Virgil paid the toll while Dante was passed out in between cantos.
Yeah, probably just dropped the pennies on his eyes, like just take them.
Yeah.
Next up, Canto 7 and 8 cover the Circle of Wrath, which is the River Styx. Dante and Virgil leave the fourth circle, and they arrive at the shore of the River Styx, where shades that have committed the sin of wrath duke it out endlessly in the mud. And there are also some people that are just submerged in the mud and not doing any fighting. Dante isn't clear on what their thing is, but yeah, Dante and Virgil are taking across the river towards the city of Dis, a nightmarish hell fortress which is guarded by Medusa and the Furies. We'll get to it later. This is the riverboat ride episode. What a coincidence! Yeah, so the boys hitch a ride on a riverboat populated entirely by very well-dressed frogs. There's some chaos that breaks out on the ship because our heroes did not actually have 2 pennies to pay the ferry, so they had to sneak on board. The authorities pursue our heroes. When the bassoon player is walloped off the boat, there's the threat of a frog riot, but Wirt saves the day with his beautiful bassoon playing, and everyone is happy and has a beautiful little dance number.
All of these episodes are so wacky.
Yeah.
I think the first time I watched it, this was the episode where I'm like, oh, I fully get it now. Like,
yes.
I was, like, Pottsfield, I was like, what the hell is happening? The house, I kind of was, like, feeling myself click into the vibes, but Lullaby and Frogland, I'm like, I fully understand exactly what the tone is demanding of me, the viewer.
Where it's like, no, bassoon player. Well, I don't have the embouchure for it, but I'll give it a go. But vital, if you've never seen this show, you have to know Wirt is voiced by Elijah Wood. So, like, there's so many layers of surrealness. He's like the only person in this show that isn't voiced by a professional opera singer, too. Except for Greg, who's voiced by a child. So, as the boys reach the shore, the frogs all bury themselves in the mud to hibernate. As another, like, little bit that's kind of out of step with the theming of the Inferno, we finally learn what the fuck is up with Adelaide of the pasture, the good woman of the woods. Terrifying witch, turns out. Wants Beatrice to guide the boys to her so she can turn them into little, like, brainwashed child servants with wool between their ears. They don't like this.
Extremely grim-coded.
Very fucked up. Yeah, this is classic Brothers Grimm. Like, Beatrice, like, to save them, opens the window and the fresh night air comes in and the witch disintegrates and Beatrice is like, what the hell? This is, again, very folkloric. There's an internal logic to folk tales, but it's not really anything that resembles what we would consider logic, but it's recognizable when you see it, and this is definitely in that vein. But the parallels to the Inferno in this one, pretty baked into the structure. The River Styx goes to the riverboat ride. There's mud everywhere. Those frogs did get pretty mad. Frogs got buried in mud. And by the end of the episode, Wirt is also pretty mad, but for unrelated reasons to the riverboat. Next canto, Heresy. This is where we start to get to the point where Dante is just like dedicating chapter after chapter to people he doesn't like. So the canto numbers are going to start going up pretty significantly.
Yeah, it was pretty much one-to-one at the start, and then it really slows down. He's like, I've got an axe to pick with all these people in late 1200s, early 1300s Italy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so this is the Circle of Heresy, the city of Dis. It's guarded by the Furies and Medusa. An angel briefly shows up to get Dante and Virgil in through the door. And in the sixth circle, heretics are imprisoned in burning tombs for their various crimes. This episode only very loosely resembles that circle, I'll admit it. The closest I can get is that they both have terrifying demonic women in them, because they do. It's notable. But what I learned while I was researching this is that this episode was originally pitched as the pilot, so its role in the ordering is a little bit strange either way. So meanwhile, in this episode, Wirt is pretty crushed by Beatrice's betrayal, and he's losing hope that they'll ever escape the woods, so he's just not having a good time. They run into the woodsman, who terrifyingly warns them to hold on to hope, because otherwise the beast will lay claim to them, but since they currently think the woodsman is the beast, this warning does not have the desired effect. Instead, they find a scary-looking tumble-down house, which is inhabited by this angelic young woman named Lorna, who seems slightly ill, and her terrifying guardian, Auntie Whispers, who claims that Lorna is afflicted by this curse, and that's why she controls her with a magic bell. But the way that Auntie Whispers talks and acts and looks and everything about her makes her seem like this absolutely horrifying monster. And the way she talks, she uses a lot of passive voice about like, oh, it's a good thing that there's nobody hiding in this house or they would be devoured. And it's like, wow, yeah, that's fucking crazy, Auntie Whispers. And of course, Wirt sees Lorna and is immediately like smitten, like, oh my god, she's so like sweet. And it's clear that this horrifying witch lady is taking advantage of her, controlling her with this magic bell to make her do endless chores lest she become wicked. And there's this interesting kind of like tonal undercurrent in this episode that like it looks like what we're seeing is a sheltered young woman in an abusive household that is telling her like, oh, you must follow my orders lest you become wicked. Like there's sort of shades of like maybe this is like some weird like two-person cult kind of thing, or Lorna's very sheltered and has been told that like, oh, her illness is the result of her wickedness and that's why she must work twice as hard. And like Wirt and Greg are like modern kids, so Wirt like, oh, as soon as Lorna's like, oh, Auntie Whispers isn't my real aunt, Wirt is like, oh my gosh, we have to get you out of here. So like, it's interesting. It's sort of like bringing in a little bit of that modern perspective on like, girl, get out of there. That's fucked up. But spoiler alert, it turns out Lorna actually is possessed by a horrifying, nightmarish, like cannibalistic ghost thingy that Auntie Whispers controls with the bell to keep her from murdering people.
Yeah, I will admit that one got me. They were setting up a very particular folkloric setup and completely inverted it.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know if it's more Rapunzel or Cinderella coded. There's kind of shades of each of them in here.
Yeah, with a taste of Baba Yaga too. There are a lot of stories where like young girl runs into the woods, takes shelter in Baba Yaga's house, has to do her impossible chores, and if she does it well enough, Baba Yaga will send her away with the ability to like spit out gold coins or some shit. But yeah.
Yeah, so it got me.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny because when they see that Lorna's like this terrifying ghost thing, Greg is like, oh wow, for some reason I thought the old lady was the scary monster. It just just goes to show you stuff. So, like, they fucking knew. They got us good. But Auntie Whispers is actually entirely benevolent. Lorna really is cursed. The boys managed to save her from the curse using the bell, but Wirt, despite this promising twist, is continuing to lose hope, and the beast is eagerly awaiting his fall into the dark. So that's fun. It's good and funky. This is very much its own thing. You can very loosely tie it in with reaching the city of Dis, but like, it's far less of a strong connection than the previous, 6 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
Cantos 12 to 17 are the circles of violence. I say circles because they are sort of concentric. It's all one circle, but they're subdivided in different ways.
Is this the word for it, the Malabolge? Is
that
what we're doing here?
That's later. Don't worry.
That's
I've got
later.
it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
This circle has the Minotaur. It's got centaurs in it. They guide Dante and Virgil further in. They reach the river Phlegethon, which those who commit violence against others are boiled in the river of blood. Past this is the Forest of Suicides, which is where those who commit violence against themselves are turned into whispering trees that bleed. The third region is a big desert under a rain of fire. Dante briefly reunites with a beloved friend there. The circle has a lot of name drops, and it only gets worse from here. This is the part where Dante is like, and I know that guy, and I know that guy, and that guy's my best friend, and it's sad that he's down here, and I hate that guy, and that guy sucks.
Yeah, this is the burn book section of the Inferno.
Oh, you know it. And then Dante and Virgil hitch a ride with the demon Garyon to carry them down. In this episode, Babes in the Woods, Greg and Wirt sail across a swampy lake and hear the beasts singing in the distance. Wirt is completely checked out. He is lost to despair. He tells Greg, when are you going to admit that we're never getting out of here? He blames Greg for all of this. Greg has lost none of his cheer, but Wirt is clearly, down and out and kind of, sinking into, a hole within himself and is not really able to check back in and be the kind of, responsible older brother that he's supposed to be. So Wirt settles in for a depression nap. Greg conks out right next to him after tucking him in with some leaves. And then this becomes the Greg show for an episode. So I've seen so many fucking theories about this episode because it is the most tonally inconsistent with the rest of the show, with a very good reason. Yeah. We're in Greg's head. Greg is a little cartoon baby man who is just having a good goddamn time. The way he sees the unknown and the way that Wirt sees the unknown seem to be completely different. But as Greg dreams, he rises up into the heavens, here reimagined as Cloud City, attended by a choir of cherubic angels that tell him how amazing and happy everything is up here. Everything we see here is an angel. They've all got little angel wings. There are weird little animals, there are weird little guys, but they've all got angel wings, so we know what we're dealing with here. While he's just hanging out in this ridiculous, silly symphonies, rubber hose animation heaven, he accidentally frees the old north wind, which seems to be not entirely a dream, because outside of the dream, the cold wind intensifies and we see snow start to fall. Yeah. But he manages to defeat the north wind in a classic cartoon fisticuffs off-screen situation, and then he seals him up in a little bottle, and they're like, wow, you did it, you saved us! And then the angelic queen of the clouds descends and offers Greg one wish. And he's like, well, great, I wish to go home with my brother. And she tells him, I'm sorry, you can go home, but your brother Wirt is too lost to the hopelessness of the woods and is firmly in the grip of the beast. And Greg is like, I don't want to go home without Wirt, so I know what my wish is going to be. And he wishes to make a deal with the beast to save his brother. And Wirt, finally kind of realizing what's going on, wakes up in a panic because he realizes Greg is gone because the beast has him. And when he tries to chase them, he falls through the ice into the water and is rescued by Beatrice. And that's how the episode ends. So, we've taken a rapid shift in tone.
The Queen of the Clouds is like, Greg, your brother is super problematic. He really needs to get his attitude tuned up.
He's at risk of cancellation.
He's collabing with some really bad dudes.
The beast has him on his friends list. So, obviously, the thing about how people who fall to despair turn into trees, that's the entire show. That's been the framework of the entire show. We've been seeing all these fucked up spooky Edelwood trees with human faces that bleed oil, and the woodsman has been grinding them up for that oil to keep the dark lantern lit, and the beast has been like, yes, I can't wait for you all to turn into delicious Edelwood trees. So, the life cycle of this forest is pretty obvious. So this is just ripped straight out of the second subcircle of the violence circle, where the suicide forest turns into, if you fall to despair in the beast's forest, you turn into a tree.
I do like how this is scaled up to the entirety of the show.
Yes.
I like that there's a little bit of movement outside of the strict one gimmick per canto. I really like that they narrowed it on okay, we're in the woods. Mm-hmm. Let's really stick with that woods angle and scale this up to be the whole thing.
Yes, I agree. The thing is, the rest of the analysis of how this episode ties into it kind of depends on whether you believe Greg is dreaming or not. Because he's obviously dreaming, but how literal is this fluffy cloud heaven thing that he's hanging out in? Because we might just be experiencing Greg Greg-O-Vision. We might just be seeing the world through his eyes, where of course he has a nice little dream where everything is wonderful and happy.
It's like Meet the Pyro from Team Fortress.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the question. Are we getting Greg-O-Vision here? Because, like, I'm willing to believe that something is really happening here. I think that the structure of the unknown is shaped by the people who are in it. So when Greg falls asleep, what he's seeing may be real, but it is being filtered through his perspective, which means it is this very sort of childish, silly symphonies looking ass kind of. But if we take at face value that this is basically heaven being like, hey, Greg, you qualify. If you want to come up here now, that's fine. And there is reason to believe that might be happening, which we will get to in the next episode.
Yeah.
But if we trust that this is an actual, like, free ticket into fluffy cloud heaven that Greg willingly gives up to try and save his brother, that structurally parallels what they're trying to do to help out Dante in the Inferno, like trying to get him out of his, like, fucked up funk, and Beatrice, a person who's already fully in heaven at that point, going to all this work to try and guide him through it so he can see what's going on. So that's fun and interesting. Next circle, Kanto is 18 through 30, is just all these people.
So many.
Dante fucking hates so many people in this circle. This is, of course, the Malabolge. It is divided into 10 concentric moats ringed by high walls with bridges connecting them. The shades punished in the 8th circle are trapped between these walls and tormented by demons. These chapters are just a huge list of people Dante recognized getting punished for lies and fraud, which, honestly, fair. Sometimes it's good to just sit down and write some real self-indulgent bullshit. So...
And then this bitch.
Yeah. And this asshole. And your mother. So, episode 9, Into the Unknown. Welcome to the flashback. This is the episode where we actually learn how the fuck did Greg and Wirt come to be lost in the woods. It's the night of Halloween. Wirt is trying to muster up the courage to give a cassette of music and poetry to the girl he likes named Sarah, but he is overwhelmed by his crushing social anxiety, while Greg is doing his best to help him, but Greg is a very straightforward, sweet kid, so the way he tries to help him is like, that's okay, I'll give the cassette to Sarah right now, kind of situation. So, like, not good for Wirt in his teenage malaise, where, like, truly every day is the worst day of your life. When their cool teen graveyard hangout is spoiled by the cops showing up, Greg and Wirt run. Wirt blames Greg for every terrible thing that's happened to him that night. They narrowly avoid getting hit by a train, and they tumble down the hill and fall into a deep pond, sinking. And that's when Wirt wakes up in the unknown, completely surrounded by bluebirds, which are Beatrice's family. They've been warming him up to try and help him heal from his dunk in the ice water, and he ventures out into the blinding snowstorm to try and find Greg and finally make things right. Because at this point, Wirt has remembered how they got here. And he is pretty sure that if he's not already dead, they are about to be.
We do see in the very beginning of the show a little bit of that underwater stuff before they end up in the woods.
And there's the sound of a train horn after every opening musical number in every episode.
Yeah.
So it's good foreshadowing. It's very solid. But the bluebirds, when Wirt goes to leave to try and find Greg, one of them says, like, oh, you know, you'll be no good to your brother dead. And he says, I was never any good to him alive either. Which basically says, like, oh yeah, Wirt thinks he knows what is already going on. But this very solidly locks in that the unknown is some kind of liminal between life and afterlife. It's at least sort of an underworld. It's structurally very similar. And you could also argue that Wirt's crushing social anxieties are the fraud part of the corresponding circle, but, like, that's a completely different kind of thing. I only bring this up because when I noticed that other people had done this analysis, I saw this get thrown around very briefly as, like, oh, well, maybe it's the fraud thing. And the thing is, like, the fraud circle is not, like, imposter syndrome. The fraud circle is like, oh, you, like, lied on the witness stand or something like that. It's, like, actively telling lies rather than, like, your brain being like, hey, you suck and nobody likes you.
Let's put it this way. Dante wasn't writing about people who had social anxiety. He was writing about the people whose lies ruined Florence.
Yeah, like, he wouldn't put you in circle 8 of 9. That's the anxiety talking. The final layer of the Inferno, the central pit. Kantos 31 to 34, pretty brisk on this one. Set aside specifically for traitors. The 9th circle is a vast frozen lake. People who committed treason against their masters, their lords, each other, are frozen at varying levels in the ice. And at the very center of hell, frozen up to his waist, is Satan himself. And while he is a vast and terrible terrifying presence, he's also weeping and wailing and is clearly not having a good time.
Yeah.
This is not, as he would be later reimagined as Sexy Satan, the proud prince of hell. This is a miserable prisoner whose own escape attempts only ensure that he remains trapped. He's flapping his wings and it's just freezing the ice harder, is the way it works. So this is a pretty interesting final act for the Inferno. And at the end of this, Dante and Virgil climb down Satan's butt crack and then up the other side because he's in the exact center of the earth. So the gravity flips and then they climb all the way back up and then they end up in purgatory, which is a whole other thing.
Fun fact about the canto counts in the Divine Comedy. There are 34 cantos in this one, 33 in Purgatorio, 33 in Paradiso. Satan specifically shows up in Canto 34 because even though he's a little bastard, he completes the perfect 100 of the kind of like divine order of the universe. A lot of fun little stuff like that sprinkled throughout the Divine Comedy. There's one also in Purgatory. I think they take an extra canto overnight to get through the sloth portion of the tower because it's sloth. They're going slowly. It takes an extra canto. All kinds of funny shit like that sprinkled throughout.
Oh yeah. I have to stress, as a structure, as like a story, and as a world building exercise, I think the Inferno is pretty close to flawless. I really do like how much work Dante put in to make it feel perfect.
As my professor in college said, there are no mistakes in Dante, and it's like, yeah, kind of,
Yeah, he knew what was up. Episode 10, The Unknown. This is the final act of the story, the direst it's ever been. Beatrice tries desperately to reach Greg, who she can see dealing with the Beast. He's basically doing all these like impossible fairy tale tasks that the Beast is setting for him. But Greg is a smart cookie and is figuring out how to make them work. It's like, oh, you wanted a golden comb? Well, I found a honeycomb. Does that work? Oh, you want a spool of silver thread? I got some spider web on a stick. Does that count? And like, it is working. But the thing is, the Beast wins either way because Greg is actively freezing to death the entire time.
Yeah.
And in fact, when he completely falls to exhaustion, the woodsman finds him starting to turn into an edelwood tree that's growing up around him. And the Beast is like, I got you more tree for the lantern we both care about keeping lit. The woodsman is not having a good time. The woodsman says he didn't initially know that the edelwood trees were lost souls, but the Beast is like, would it have mattered to save your daughter's soul? Ooh. So they kind of tumble off into the woods fighting each other, and Wirt and Beatrice find Greg, and Greg mournfully confesses that he does think this is all his fault, and he reveals that he stole a little rock with a face painted on it from the garden of this like woman back when they were trick-or-treating on a normal Halloween night, and he's like, it's a rock fact. And Wirt is like, Greg, no, that's not why we're in here. It's not your fault. I'm sorry I said that. And like, it's truly heartbreaking. This is a really impactful scene. And the Beast arrives and offers Wirt a deal. He says that to save Greg from turning into this edelwood tree and being lost to the forest, he'll put his soul into the dark lantern. Wirt will have to take the woodman's role of lantern bearer, fueling the lantern with oil from the edelwood trees to keep his brother's soul alive. And Wirt is initially going to do this, and then he kind of stops and is like, hey, wait, that doesn't actually make any sense. And the Beast is like, what? Sir, excuse me, we were talking about your brother's soul, and Wirt's like, yeah, but like, why do you care? Why are you so obsessed with this? Like, it almost seems like you're the one in this lantern. And the Beast gets very upset and gets very intimidating, and he's like, are you prepared to face true darkness? And Wirt cracks open the lantern, and his voice breaks a little as he says, are you? And goes to blow it out. And the Beast panics and is like, don't! And Wirt is like, okay, so I was 100% right. Just hands the lantern off to the woodsman, like, here you go, bud, do whatever you want. Me and my brother are getting the fuck out of here. Gets Greg out of the tree, carries him off, offhandedly gives Beatrice the tool she needs to save her family from being bluebirds because he picked it up on the way. The Beast tries very hard to persuade the woodsman that this is all bullshit and actually their deal is still on, and then the woodsman blows out the lantern. In the real world, Wirt wakes up still sinking underwater, swims down to get Greg and also the frog that they've been hanging out with all episode, swims them to the surface, gets medical attention, and everyone gets a happy ending. So the Inferno parallels in this episode are pretty solid, but again, they're very structural. It's not so much about the plot, except for the fact that there's a central antagonistic figure that turns out to be a lot more of a weenie than we thought he was. But the main thing is that the descent into the heart of the unknown is accompanied by the significant drop in temperature. As we get to the final episodes, it gets colder and colder and colder. And I've seen some people theorize that this is sort of a metaphor for the fact that Greg and Wirt are getting closer to death in the real world as this is happening. thing, but it also lines up with the fact that the closer you get to the center of hell in the Inferno, the colder it gets until the final layer is just this tortuously frozen lake. Side note, Greg thinks they're in this terrible place because he did something wrong and deserves to be here, which is a heartbreaking little bit of child logic that I wanted to highlight just because it really makes me sad. But it does also like tie in with the fact that like this is the Inferno. In the Inferno, everyone except Dante is here because they deserve to be. And the fact that we're just like, no, Greg, that's stupid is like, yeah, listen, we're borrowing the world building of the Inferno, but people don't end up in the unknown because they're being punished for their sins, okay? Like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And of course, the final reveal about the beasts, that the terrifying nightmare that's been haunting this place is actually this pitiful, powerless being, a prisoner of this realm, whose only actual ability is tormenting other lost souls. Satan in the Inferno has like the three greatest traitors in history in his three mouths, and he's like chewing them up. So like Brutus is in there,
Cassius and
Judas is in there, and Cassius, two Roman guys and the guy who killed Jesus. So all equally bad.
Pontius Pilate sweating down in like circle 4 is like, woof, dodged a bullet there.
Man, pass that buck right
Good thing
along.
none of this was my fault.
I've done literally nothing wrong.
The circle of just following orders.
But yeah, and the thing is, you know, you could even take a little step further and be like, oh yeah, you know, in the Inferno, Satan is like chewing, you know, grinding up these people in the unknown. The beast is having the woodsman grind up these lost souls to fuel the lantern. It kind of, this is a sort of parallels.
Yeah.
So in the absolute broad strokes, when we zoom out of the episode to episode breakdown we've just been doing, and we talk about like, okay, the structure of the show, the structure of the Inferno. Dante's Inferno is this constant descent into increasingly frigid and inhospitable wastelands. Although each circle is its own ecosystem, so it's like there is also the on fire desert in like circle 8, I want to say, or 7. But as a rule, when they get to the final circle, that is the coldest point in the entire cosmology that we're exploring here. And of course, the narrative is also haunted by the through line that, hey, this is hell. Satan's got to be around here somewhere. So, like, there is kind of that question of, like, when's he going to show up? Is he going to pop out and go, like, rah, oh, no. But Dante's being inexorably drawn downward towards what must be the throne of the lord of this realm. And Dante is not dead in this story. It's a plot point that he is much more physical and tangible than everyone else around here. But he's not exactly alive because he's in hell and he can't get out. So he does kind of have to do a bunch of shit to get back to being properly alive. So he's sort of between life and death throughout this story. But when Dante finally reaches that bottom circle and sees Satan for what he is, he sees him as this grotesque, monstrous creature, just as helpless and trapped, if not more so than everyone else in this realm. He's not the powerful lord of this place. He's not ruling in hell. He's just another prisoner. And then there's nowhere to go but up. Everything is better from this point onward, except for that one part in Purgatory where people's eyelids are sewn shut. Other than that, everything is fine. Getting back to the show this is actually about, does this give us everything we need to understand what the fuck is up with the beast? Also, sorry for my fellow tripophobes in the audience about this one shot of the beast I'm using as the background. He's just...
I was gonna say, why would you do this to yourself?
Hey, you know, if I pretend it's not there, it's like it's not there.
Cool. That's not how that works.
I just love his design, okay? I really think he's cool. But the thing is, you guys know, I love a good structural similarity between stories. I love to pick a trope out of something and be like, this shows up here and here and here, and I like to sort things into boxes, and I like being like, this story is drawing on this story. I love it when there's a Goku or a Sun Wukong in another font, which is always fun. But when we find that there is an Inferno thread interwoven through the entirety of Over the Garden Wall, it doesn't actually tell us all that much about the show, except for the fact that our heroes are on a journey between life and death. It's possible that some of the people they encounter are dead and living out their karmic afterlives. There are some significant names on that graveyard we see them in episode 9, so like, ugh. And the scary bad guy isn't really all that hot shit after all. And that's pretty cohesive, but there's a few points where this doesn't really line up. If we're following the framework of the Inferno, then the beast is obviously slotting into the analogous role of Satan, where despite the bravado and terrifying reputation, he's just as much a prisoner as anyone else. But the Satan in the Inferno doesn't actually have that bravado. He doesn't have the sort of pop culture Lucifer, deal maker, you know, dangerous figure kind of thing. He's truly just stuck there. We don't even, I think, hear him talk. He's just like roaring and wailing. He doesn't say anything. He's truly just like a big complicated thing in the skybox having a real bad day.
Yeah.
He's no threat to Dante or Virgil, and he's really no threat to anyone except the guys that got yeeted straight into his jaws. Whereas the beast is very different. The reveal that he's he's powerless is a major twist in the show. As much as I love drawing out the thread, and as much as I did base this entire presentation on, hey, the Inferno is in here, let's talk about that. Yeah, we've talked about that, but there's still more to talk about. And I do want to talk a little bit about how the Beast's characterization draws a lot less on the Inferno beyond that final twist, and a lot more on the other things that went into this show. Because while Over the Garden Wall does episodically mirror the layers of Dante's Inferno, I'll swear to that. Like, there are too many parallels for it to be a coincidence.
Oh, yeah.
And there's too many parallels for it to even be by accident. Like, it's number for number. But that's very clearly not the whole point of the story, or even most of it. It's a small incidental part of the actually interesting things this show does to set its tone. Because we were talking about this earlier. The tone of this show is so specific. It draws on so many different things, but it creates this like very odd little concoction that is so autumnal is the only way we can really describe it. And the unknown itself is meant to defy categorization and explanation. It is by its nature a mystery without a full resolution. In the original drafts, the unknown was called the in-between, and it was described as the place between life and death, dreams and reality. And when asked outright if it was supposed to be limbo or purgatory, the showrunner was like, well, that's one interpretation.
Powerful.
Yes.
I love when people in charge of shows are like, I'm not going to tell you shit.
You can think whatever you want. So the unknown is not just the Inferno, and making that connection is not enough to tap into what makes the show interesting. Because I will say, sometimes it is. Sometimes when you realize that you're watching, oh, this is Journey to the West in a different font, or like, oh, this is this in a different font, that's when you can be like, okay, I can now predict everything that is going to happen with my huge wrinkly brain. But that's clearly not the case here. This is like identifying like a leitmotif in a much larger, complex orchestration and being like, I found it, but there's a lot of other shit going on. So let's look past my initial excitement at the, hey, I recognize that thing, and let's venture a little bit deeper into the unknown. So we were talking about the pitch of this show. When it was initially proposed, it was an adventure story called Tome of the Unknown, where our protagonists, Greg, Wirt, and Beatrice, would be seeking the lost pages of a book called The Tome of the Unknown, containing every story ever forgotten. In the pitch, the boys escape a train that they believe is heading for the afterlife, and they semi-accidentally enter into a Faustian bargain with Old Scratch, which is fully just a nickname for the devil. And they agree to retrieve the Tome of the Unknown, and then he scatters all the pages, so they have to go do a lot of work for it. In the second pitch for the show, a little bit more polished, the Faustian bargain side was dropped, and they were instead given their quest by the helpful woodsman, who had a dark secret that he was actually working with this frightening Old Scratch type figure. Or I think in the second pitch, they would learn that the woodsman was writing more pages into the book so that they would never get out of the unknown. But the idea that the woodsman was helpful but also working for the bad guy was there from pretty early on. And he tells them that to get out, they have to live out their adventures as described in the Tome of the Unknown. There would be stories and like adventures and weird shit going on in there, and they would have to go to the place where that's happening and just engage with this like weird folktale made real so that they could collect the page and get out. This is a perfect pitch for an anthology series of disconnected weird tales, and it's not the show we ended up getting, but the vibes are very clearly still there in the final production.
I also want to see that second pitch. That seems really interesting.
Yeah, the idea that these are basically two real kids trapped in a weird storybook situation where they have to find these stories as they're playing out, sort of insert themselves into them and extract them in order to escape. Very interesting pitch, and again, that's kind of an infinitely iteratable formula. You can just kind of keep throwing more weird shit at them and you'll be fine.
God, I mean, like, write that in, like, the 17 or 1800s, and that's, like, the corpus of all fairy tales in a world without the Grimm brothers.
Exactly.
Dang.
Yes.
Oh, that's versatile.
Yeah, with the framing sequence that you've got two normal-ass people basically touring their way through it in abject confusion at what the fuck's going on. So, there are a lot of vibes in this concoction, and if we separate some of them out, we can see what they are. Obviously, we just spent the last, like, 25 slides talking about how it's Dante's Inferno, but there's also a lot of influence of Germanic fairy tales, very specifically the Brothers Grimm edition, where there's just that little soupçon of extra nightmare fuel. A lot of colonial American aesthetic in the architecture, the clothing that we see, all that jazz.
Yeah.
A lot of the very specific haunting Victorian energy of Massachusetts, apparently.
Turbo Salem.
Oh, yeah. There's some Alice in Wonderland, there's some Little Nemo in Slumberland, there's some Dorothy and Oz. That one kept showing up during the... I read the art book for this, and there's a lot of stuff in there about, like, yeah, we were sort of trying to get an Oz vibe, and, like, these are all cases where a fairly ordinary protagonist gets yoked into a weird realm that does not entirely function in a familiar way to them.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably the least well-known of these three is Little Nemo in Slumberland, which were these, like, lavishly illustrated Sunday comics of this, like, little kid go to sleep and enter Slumberland, and there would be weird shit going on, you know, floating around, contraptions options, adventures. It was very accurate capturing of how dream logic actually kind of felt.
Oh, this is wacky.
Yeah. Oh, you looked it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my mom had like
Whoa.
a whole book of these things that I just read through, and I kept waiting for there to be like a point or an overarching plot line, and then about halfway through I was like, this is dreams. There's never going to be a point or an overarching plot line.
Absolutely not.
I just like it when things have points. I can't, what can I say?
So you hate circles? Wow.
Bitch, that's a whole other sentence.
Average discussion on the internet.
Obviously, and seemingly inexplicably, there's a ton of operatic influence in this show. Like I mentioned, pretty much every voice actor in here that isn't Elijah Wood or an actual child is like a trained opera singer. And a lot of them perform operatic musical numbers for some reason, which is extremely charming and whimsical.
And the Beast is always off to the side of the camera humming opera off screen.
Yeah, singing in that basso profundo he's got. There's some influence of silent film. There's a lot of influence of like the Betty Boop era, rubber hose animation, a lot of silly symphonies. And to top it all off, you throw in two normal, mostly modern American kids that talk like real human beings.
Yeah.
Admittedly weird human beings.
Not so much Greg.
Listen, Greg talks like a child. That is fairly hard to capture and quite realistic. And then Wirt talks like a teenager who is very impressed with himself being able to parcel out that he's having emotions.
Yeah.
It's very naturalistic dialogue. One of the things that is so jarring about episode 9, where we get the flashback to how they got here, is that like everyone they deal with is just like a complete person who talks like a normal ass person does. It's so shocking after 8 episodes straight of like weird folktale nonsense. I do think the fact that like Greg and Wirt are two normal kids from the normal suburbs are like kind of intrinsic in what makes the vibe cocktail work so well, because they're clearly not all that up to date on their folklore and fairy tales. When Wirt sees Beatrice talk, his first argument is that doesn't make sense because a bird's brain isn't like large or complex enough to form words, and Beatrice gets offended and he apologizes, and then he's like, why am I apologizing to it?
And she's like, what do you mean it?
Yeah, how dare you, sir? Whereas Beatrice knows a lot of the fairy tale / Aesop's fable tropes and actually like exploits them to try and get the boys to do what she wants. Like after they blow her off in episode 1, she pops back up again in episode 2 like tangled in a thorn bush, and she's like, hey, free me and I'll do you a favor. Speed running like half of the Aesop's fables. Like that's some real Androcles' lion bullshit. It's so casually dropped, like, hey, I know how these stories go. I'm in an unexpected role in this one. I know how to play my part. Hey, help me out. I'm an animal in distress. Oh, thanks for that. I'll help you out later. Follow me to the Good Witch Adelaide. And everything about Beatrice and her life is very Grimm's fairy tale. Because, like, we learned that the reason why she and her whole family are bluebirds is because she threw a rock at a bluebird and it turned her whole family into bluebirds. And then we learned that the way to change her back, that Adelaide has been kind of hanging over her head, is a pair of scissors that she'll need to use to cut the wings off of. And that's like classic Grimm's fairy tale bullshit. That's like Stepsisters Dance to Death and Red Hot Shoes coded. That's like, it's upsettingly visceral even for a theoretically positive thing. And aside from Beatrice's kind of folkloric vibes and the Beast's kind of like folkloric antagonist vibes of like, here, do this impossible task for me and I shall grant you this wish. Oh my god, you did the impossible task, how unexpected. Well, here's another one, I bet you can't do it twice. And even there, he's very intentionally putting himself in that role where even if quote unquote vanquished, he's still gonna win because Greg is still gonna die. So like, like he's cheating, and like Greg is like, I did it, I beat the Beast, and it's like, you did, and you're still turning into a tree. So
I see you solved my riddle, but I have drawn you as the soy jack and me as the Chad.
But like, and the rest of the unknown kind of operates on that sort of Little Nemo, like dreamlike variant of cartoon logic. Like things can happen as long as they're whimsical. So like the animals we see in Schooltown Follies can wear clothes but not talk, but the frog that they hang out with can suddenly sing in the Riverboat episode. So like, I guess we're just doing that. And again, like looking for hardline logic, which is a mistake that Wirt makes at several points in this show, is clearly not how the unknown works. There are parts of it that are fairly tangible and parts of it that are very fluid and weird.
That's what I meant when I was saying, like, it took me until episode 5 to click into the vibes of the show.
Yeah.
Like, what the f is happening? And then eventually I'm like, oh, I get it. I can't describe it, but I get it.
My third eye is wide open. Now, the thing that I was wondering was, how does the Inferno get into all this? And the answer is, I have no fucking clue. I know it's there. I don't know when they decided to throw it in, because it's not in the original pitch. Because, like, the original pitch for the story is almost totally unstructured. Like we said, it's like a perfect anthology pitch. Like, you can just do whatever you want in there. You can have them cross over with anything and it would make sense. The episode ordering wanders around significantly. Like I mentioned, The Ringing of the Bell was originally pitched as like the first episode, and then the execs were like, that seems a little fucked up and dark for the pilot. Can you give us something else? And they were like, oh, maybe. And there was a version where instead of not knowing how the boys get into the unknown, we see them fall into the unknown in episode 1 instead of in episode 9. So like there were a lot of versions of that. And I read through the art book and there were a bunch of interviews about the development of the show, and like they never bring up the Inferno aside from the fact that Old Scratch, as obviously like folkloric devil, was like a pretty early antagonistic concept. And the thing is, like I say, if it was a conscious choice, I am positive it was a conscious choice. It's too specific. There's no fucking way this was an accident. Yeah. But it does seem like that choice could have been made kind of late in development when they were locking down the episode ordering and the general vibes. Because again, it's an anthology series. They can do whatever they want. And initially they were like, I would love to just make like 3 seasons of this show. I'd love to just keep doing it. And then at some point they were like, no, I can make this bite-sized. I can make this one cohesive story with a few weird little side quests. And if you've decided to do exactly 10 episodes anyway, and you need some kind of overarching structure, it doesn't hurt to just draw on something else that has 10, 9 layers in a movie, as it were. And this, I think, is most exemplified in the character of the Beast, because figuring out what his deal was seems to have been kind of a process for the team, and they didn't really hit on what he actually was until quite later. Whereas early it was like Old Scratch, this sort of like comical trickster, Cuphead devil type situation. This is like the devil went down to Georgia type, where like eminently outsmartable and all that jazz. And then they developed him through multiple drafts, and some of them he looks like this kind of like monstrous animal, and some of them he's kind of got like wizard vibes, but they kind of really nailed it with what he actually is.
Oh, yeah.
As basically just an embodiment of the forest itself, literally part of the food chain. Something that looks like a mashup of a bunch of Edelwood trees in a loose humanoid form. And in the final version, he is pure fairy tale nightmare fuel, uncut with anything else. He's not an outside threat. He's not a Scooby-Doo villain to be unmasked. He kind of puts himself into the classic folktale role of the supernatural entity that makes bargains, presenting the hero with hypothetically impossible tasks. But even when Greg is outsmarting him by succeeding in those tasks, the Beast is still winning because Greg is still dying the entire time. Mm-hmm. So like, it's not just, the Beast is like a folklore threat, a Baba Yaga type, something that you can outsmart that will let you walk away with a prize. No, this thing is malevolent and carnivorous, and it wants you dead. And so tautologically, in its final draft, the Beast is the thing that lurks in the woods. The way they put it is when they nailed his final design, they were like, oh yeah, he's the perfect reflection of unknown danger, the thing you're most scared to see in the dark. Just like the unknown has no one right answer, the Beast doesn't either. So all we learn about him in the end is that he's in some way connected to the Dark Lantern, and even then, we don't get like a full resolution on that. We don't see him die or anything when the woodsman blows out the lantern. We just hear some unspeakable horrifying noises, and then Greg and Wirt wake up in the real world.
And we see the woodsman is fine later.
We do see the
his
woodsman's
daughter's
fine.
back.
Yes.
But I like the construction of the Beast as basically like the driving engine in this ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Of the Beast creates the trees by preying on people's hopelessness and then commands them to be chopped up and burned in the lantern to sustain himself. Mm-hmm. It's a really cool, he is very much creating the woods and then being the fire that consumes them, and going out and propagating there to be more woods. And it's not a puppet master, he's just got one guy who he tricked into doing bad things for him in the form of the woodsman, but he's this force. The world of the unknown is in many ways weirdly static.
Yeah.
All of these kind of folktale scenarios are going to just keep going on in circles forever until Wirt and Greg show up and resolve them variously as they wander through this. Mm-hmm. But the motion at the core of the unknown is this life cycle, Krebs cycle ass dynamic with the Beast feeding on despair, feeding on hopelessness, and then it's like, all right, yum yum, burned up.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fascinating, because if we try and like loop this back into the Inferno, even though at this point it's pretty clear like the Inferno structurally is here, but it didn't shape this part of the story. But rather than necessarily tying in with Satan like I originally said, it seems more like the Beast is the manifestation of the unknown itself, which in the parallel would be like the Beast is representative of the terror of hell, which you could probably pull a thesis out of like, oh, is this show about like, hey, hell is bullshit, get out of there, girl, because is. Like, maybe when Greg says, oh, I deserve to be here, I did something wrong, and Wirt's like, no, that's bullshit, I'm getting out of here. Maybe that is something there. I don't know. I do want to kind of bring this up because I think there's actually a very interesting larger scale discussion to be had here about reference and homage and how they can work. Because it's a complicated art form. And when you're borrowing an idea from a very old, well-known story that's like in the most public domain it can kind of be difficult to know where to start and where to stop. And the Inferno is an extremely referenceable story. Like, in the original form, it's Dante's personal shit list, but the world building that he laid down underneath all that is like really solid. And he kind of just actually completely reshaped our cultural vision of what hell looks like. He defined
Christians reading it are like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh my god, he cooked. Yeah, holy shit. This is fire.
Yeah, I'll incorporate that into my belief system. Except literally.
Literally.
Literally, yeah. It's, oh my god. I think when I was looking this up, you know how Google will do like the sort of like people also searched for, and one of them was like, what does the Bible say about Dante's Inferno? And it's like, nothing, on account of how it wouldn't be written for another 1,300 years.
Thank you, Google. You are very smart.
Oh, boy. But like, the thing is, the Inferno is extremely referenceable. If you need to show what an underworld looks like, you can borrow any or all of it. When we briefly get a glimpse of hell in Castlevania in the show, they like zoom the camera through, and you can kind of notice like, oh, that's the city of Dis, and that's the Suicide Forest, and that's the thing, and there's Dracula and Lisa. That's great. I want to say Vox Machina season 3, they briefly go to hell, and they're like, here's the city of Dis, and I was like, yeah, you gotta throw in the city of Dis. I mean, that wasn't their idea. I'm sure that's in the actual D&D Planescape source book. But like, it's just, this locked in so many ideas, and it's so referenceable, and anytime you're telling like a catabasis story where it's like a character goes into the underworld and then emerges again, there's a lot of things you can draw on, but for a world map, it doesn't really get much better than Dante. He really laid that sucker out comprehensively. Whereas like, you know, Orpheus, Odysseus, even the rescue of Ishtar, which is like hero-specific gates. But like, a lot of catabasis narratives are not as interested in laying out the actual structure of the underworld, because a lot of them recognize the underworld as kind of a metaphorical state. It's a little bit of like, just this is the place you go for the belly of the whale situation, and then you come back out again.
Fun fact about catabasis narratives is Plato's Republic is a catabasis narrative. Literally the first lines are, Katabento Pirea. I went down to the Piraeus to have a discussion because Athens, you know, up on the hill and stuff, and then you go down, you walk along the long walls to the Piraeus, the harbor, to go chat. So Plato is going into the cave, going down to the Piraeus. Or Socrates is going down to the Piraeus. Anyway,
that's so fun.
Fun fact.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, like, there are a ton of catabasis narratives where a protagonist journeys into the underworld, speaks with the dead, and then returns alive. And, you know, a lot of them are drawing on each other for reference. But the Inferno is kind of the peak of, like, how does this look and feel? Like, what are we going to do? Like, nobody has yet done it better. But there's something very clean about the way that Over the Garden Wall incorporates the Inferno without overdoing it or sacrificing any of its other vibes. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between drawing on an older story and adapting an older story. Because Over the Garden Wall is not an adaptation of Dante's Inferno. It's more like an echo of it. Greg and Wirt are not Dante collectively or individually. They are two independent characters. And one of the things I thought was interesting in the art book is that, like, it took them a while to nail down Wirt's personality specifically. They kind of always wanted him to be like the guy who accidentally like talks himself into a hole and then keeps digging and makes things worse. So like that part seems to have been there from fairly early on, but the specific kind of like bundle of nerves and social anxiety, while also having like odd amounts of knowledge about just random shit, because he's also just a complete person, that took him a little while to strike the balance on. So like, this is not Dante, you know, having like the world's worst indigestion dream and having a really bad time of it. This is two people who are engaging with the world in the way that makes sense for them. So like, Greg is constantly running off and doing wacky little shit because he's like a goofy little kid who's having a great time, whereas Wirt is very much in his feelings and like, you know, kind of languishing and finding ways to make this weird world about how he's having the worst day ever. They're not the first people to wake up lost in the woods. In the conceit of this story, they are not the first people to have stumbled into the unknown. Like, in the very opening musical number performed by their frog playing the piano, it's about how the unknown is this strange realm and a lot of people pass through it. And I just think that's kind of beautiful, because the way that this story engages with stories as a whole is this idea that a story can be a thing that happens to anyone. And so while these characters are being slotted into familiar roles, guided along something that resembles a familiar path that we can recognize from the Inferno, the story they play out is different. The way they engage with those layers is different. They're certainly not sort of a passive observer in the way that Dante is in the Inferno. They spend a lot of these episodes actively improving everywhere they visit and making it better. Beatrice shares her name with Dante's angelic guide, but she is not anything like the Beatrice we see in the Divine Comedy. She's got her own motivations, and they're not all that great, and it takes her a while to sort of like shape up and start helping out. And in its original concept, you can see these ideas have been there since the beginning. Tome of the Unknown was an intentional reflection of old folktale archetypes getting dropped onto these hapless new kids, so that they would have to find a way to get through them. So like, even though Over the Garden Wall is very different structurally and narratively than its original pilot pitch, this concept rings true throughout. The idea that an old story can be made new by simply applying it to a new guy. A new hero confronting an old story turns it into a new story. And I think that like, this is a thing that I see a lot of writers kind of freak out about when they realize that it's very, very difficult to be original and also good at writing at the same time. A lot of times I've seen people who are like, oh, I've got a great new idea for a story. I've got this awesome character who's like this and that and this. And then someone's like, oh, wow, that reminds me of my favorite character from this show you've literally never heard of. And it's like, oh, no. That's the thing. There's nothing new under the sun.
Even worse, you get like the, yes, you see, my audience is expecting a satisfying resolution. So in my infinite wisdom, I'm going to write a story ending that sucks ass and doesn't make sense. They'll never see that one coming at all.
Yeah. Sometimes in the attempt to avoid what has already been done, you find out why nobody's done it like you're doing it now.
I think there are two interesting comparisons that I can make here about the relationship between, I guess, people finding themselves in stories and how they handle it. One is recent feature on the channel. We talked about The Last Unicorn, which is abundantly about people coming to grips with how they do or don't fit into the abundantly fairy tale world that surrounds them. Whether they are like, yep, nope, this is my lot in life. I'm gonna be this forever, and that's okay. Or there was once a time where I could have been the hero, and that time is gone, and now I'm lost. And then, oh my God, there's a unicorn. Well, I'm not the kind of archetype that this is supposed to happen to. So what the hell do I do now? In the character of Molly, there's a lot of interesting stuff in that story where people are basically asking and answering a similar kind of question. Not quite the same thing as this, for sure. And the other one is a comparison that you've made a while ago at this point about Shakespearean tragedy being very much a combo of story and character. Othello and Hamlet managed to fuck everything up perfectly for the scenario that they are in. And if you have them switch places with each other, it ends up fine.
Yeah, because Othello is so impulsive, he kills Desdemona before he can think it through, whereas Hamlet is such a chronic overthinker that he waits way too long while the whole Claudia situation gets so much worse. Whereas if you give Hamlet the Desdemona problem, he overthinks it for so long that he figures out that Iago's the bad guy, and if you give Othello the Claudia situation, he kills Claudio and everyone's fine.
Yes.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've read them, forgive me.
It's fine, it's complicated. But no, you're right. And I do think that, like, part of what people mean when they try to sort of assuage the fears of new writers who are freaking out about that, who are like, no, my idea has to be original, otherwise why would anyone bother with it? And it's like, look, setting aside the holy shit 2 cakes situation, when people say, like, hey, listen, the thing that will make your story, like, unique is its execution, not its overarching plot summary, that's something that doesn't really hit a lot of the time for new writers who have not actually experienced this or, like, haven't seen other people do that. But, like, the number of different takes you can see on the same basic structure of a story format really kind of highlights that, like, yeah, the bare bones summary of this is not going to be the thing that sets it apart from everything else. I mean, the thing we were just talking about with, like, Catabasis narratives of, like, person descends into the underworld, hangs out with a ghost, and returns is like, that's a very oddly specific thing for there to be multiple stories about, and yet there are. You get, oh yeah, Odysseus ends up in the underworld and talks to his old war buddies and then makes it back out. They send someone to rescue Ishtar from her imprisonment in the underworld. Oh, we try and get Persephone out of the underworld, but it doesn't really work, and that's how we get, like, the seasonal cycle. And Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus goes into the underworld, tries to get Eurydice back, it fails. There's, like, so many different ways that you can execute the same story. And there's so many different ways you can execute that, even if what you're doing is intentionally referencing an older story. And there are stories I've read where it's like, oh, these characters very clearly map into archetypes I'm familiar with. Like, okay, what we're doing here is this old story. It's like, oh, we're doing the Round Table again. Or, oh, we're doing the Pilgrim's Journey to the West again. We're doing the brothers in the Mahabharata again. And that tells you something. It gives you a little hint of what you can maybe expect in the long term of like what general archetypes is everyone going to slot into, what arcs can I expect, maybe one or two villains that might pop up getting drawn from the same source material. Doesn't tell you anything else about it. I don't know, I just think that like Over the Garden Wall is a really interesting example of that, as a story that you could basically argue is beat for beat a retelling of this other story that has existed for, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years, and simultaneously completely its own thing. Like if you tried to say Over the Garden Wall is just Dante's Inferno, you would be categorically incorrect. Just on the vibes of it, and like the structure, the characterization, the resolution even.
So you're telling me that when I tapped into, oh yeah, no, it's not just Dante, it's also this kind of Americana autumnal vibe, and also Grimm's Fairy Tales. I was doing the obligatory red or blue slides forward 15 slides and snipes the thesis out.
Yes, you were in fact doing exactly that, and I'm very proud. And that's honestly basically everything I had to say about it. My conclusion is oddly like more conclusion-y than I normally let them be, but a new take on an old story can faithfully capture the structure and vibes of that source, but still be so original on its own merits that it's barely recognizable as that old story at all, and I just think that's neat.
I also think that's neat.
Yeah.
There is a degree to which the Inferno, Paradiso, Purgatorio, yada yada,
the Divine Comedy,
are very, that's what it's called, are very, very tapped into Dante's specific moment, his like cultural soup, his fierce personal grudges at turn of the 1300s, Italy and Europe more broadly, his hopes and dreams for the new Holy Roman Emperor who's totally going to unify everything and it's all going to be great, we're going to be living back in a glory age of Rome again. And then it's like, you know, real life footnote, like 4 years later this guy died accomplishing nothing. It's like, damn it! But this is, in a similar way, very tapped into a specific set of vibes that are distinct to its own little world. It's not trying to be the Inferno and Italian and European and all this, you know, specific medieval history. It's taking, you know, some structure, some archetypes, some thesis, a lot of physical world building, and being willing to play with it. And there is something a little bit authentic in being willing to modify it and change the vibes and change the aesthetic so much.
Yeah.
Because as the original Divine Comedy is very tapped into Dante's moment, this is, I mean, colonial aesthetic, 200-year separation, sure. But I like that this is very similarly willing to adapt the tone and not try to slavishly reconstruct it. Because Dante was very willing to be very specific. He wasn't trying to capture, biblical vibes as of, 35 AD, 1 year after the crucifixion. He's like, no, time has passed. I'm going to combine all of these different influences from biblical storytelling to Greek mythological storytelling to my own personal moment. And it is a similar act of combining all of these different influences. And we can look at Dante and say, oh, well, that's just how the Inferno is.
Right.
But if we crack it open, there's 17 layers of shit in there that combine into the aesthetic of the Divine Comedy.
Yeah, I think that in the act of deciding when to reference and borrow from other stories, there's always that sort of question of like, how much of this do I want to take? And in the case of an older story like The Inferno, people could take however much they want. Like, I think we just saw a trailer for like a new Dante's Inferno game.
Yes!
Which looks very Souls-like.
Oh my God, it looks so good. It's called La Divina Commedia. It's by an Italian team that made Inotria, the last song, which I actually want to go back and play, because Astrobot came out like the same time, so I got distracted.
Yeah, priorities.
But it looks really good. It's kind of a dark fantasy imagining of the Divine Comedy.
Right.
And I think it looks a lot cooler than the Dante's Inferno game from like 2004, 5, 6, because that had a very, very much inspired by heavy metal.
Yeah,
1980s,
where he's
in parentheses, derogatory.
Is that the one where Dante's like really buff and has like a cross pattern on his abdomen?
I think his nips are like fully out the entire game.
Okay, that's a bit much.
Yeah, it's a very particular aesthetic that I don't think served the story very well. I didn't play the game. It was kind of like one age group above where I was at the time where it came out.
Right.
But what I like about what this new game that it'll come out whenever it comes out, Inotria came out like last year, so it'll probably be a couple years. and then I can let you get back to the point you made before I interrupted you, because I'm really excited for this game. The choice of doing a dark fantasy framing, I think, is really interesting because it taps into the core aesthetic of the woodblock illustrations prints of Gustave Doré, which are like the most iconic visual reference for the Divine Comedy. And I am really excited to see how they adapt that. What I've seen so far is just, Dante fighting some guy in the woods, but like they take his little poet crown and turn it into like a kind of helmet thing, and they make the leaves like metal in his little laurel crown. I am a sucker for the vibes on this game.
Yeah, hopefully it's good. We'll see.
Hopefully it's good. Yeah,
but it's an example of that thing I was talking about of like, this is a book where you can borrow as much of it as you want. It's like 700 years old. You can do whatever you want with it. And there's a ton of stories like that are just so far into the public domain that they've just become kind of like cultural staples unto themselves. And when you are choosing how much or how little of that story to draw on, it's always a complicated question. And I think that one thing that's really kind of jumped out at me while I was doing this research is that like the Inferno is so structurally present in this show, and it was clearly a comparatively last minute choice. Clearly they decided to do that when they were coming up with the episode ordering. They were like, we'll do one here, one here, one here. I can slide in this story here, this story here. I can do some weird shit with Mr. Quincy Endicott and his fabulous wealth in the Circle About Money and yada yada. And then for the finale, we can do all this stuff. And it's so casual. It's so easy. It's like, I need something that will help me figure out what order and structure to do for these 10 episodes. I got it. We'll do this.
Yeah.
And it's almost casual. And I really kind of respect that. Because, like, I don't know. I think I've seen so many people get really tangled up in knots about originality in multiple different directions. Because, like, on the flip side of this, there's like a phrase that's like, good artists borrow, great artists steal, or something like that.
I never liked that phrase.
I don't love it either because it doesn't have enough clarification. But I think the general concept behind it is like, a good artist will know when to just fully take something and be like, yeah, this is great, rather than kind of pussyfooting around it, I guess, is the idea.
I think there's, like the confidence of knowing how to use something very specifically, because stealing is more brazen than borrowing.
Yes.
But that's one of those like pieces of pithy writing advice that I feel like is more confusing than helpful.
Yeah, especially because it kind of feels like it's saying, great artists plagiarize, which is a completely different animal than what we're talking about here. Because that's the thing, is like, this is homage, which is not the same thing as adaptation, and it's not the same thing as plagiarism. Those are completely different animals. But I do think that like when artists are worrying about originality, all of these things kind of tangle up into this one confusing space where it's like, am I allowed to use this idea that I've already seen used? Well, that really depends on what the idea is and in what context and structure you've already seen it used. Because like nobody can lay claim to like the story format of like, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. That's like 80% of the entire corpus of literature right there.
Enemies to lovers, 500,000 words.
Yeah, exactly. So like nobody can lay claim to that. Nobody can be like, oh, you can't do this. They already did that this one time. But when you get something like this where it's like, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of older stories that have already laid out roadmaps of what these kinds of stories can be structured like, is it still telling your own story if you take anything from these? And it's like, well, yeah, demonstrably, yeah, if you look at this, it's like we took the basic structure of this 700-year-old story, this roadmap of like what an underworld could look like, and then we dumped these new guys into it, and we gave it this really, really confusingly like vibed aesthetic, and we managed to create something entirely new that has lived rent-free in my brain for 11 years. So like something's working. I don't know, like I couldn't quite circle my way around to like a specific thesis for this little back chunk of the slideshow, but I really do think that there's something kind of incredible about how this show so effortlessly draws on all these different sources, weaves them together, and makes something entirely new, where you can still trace the threads and be like, oh yeah, I recognize this is drawn from Silly Symphonies, this was drawn from Alice in Wonderland, this is drawn from Little Nemo, this is drawn from opera, this is drawn from the Inferno. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. I really like it. I kind of love that this show ends with a lot of big open question marks. It's willing to let things remain unresolved. Like, we never quite get an answer on what happened to the beast. We don't get a sequel hook. We don't get a tease. We get little vignettes. The ending is ambiguous enough that I've seen people theorize that maybe this isn't actually all that profound, because I see this about everyone, but I have seen people bring up like, oh, well, maybe they didn't even make it out of the unknown, because when the frog is singing the ending song, he says, it's the loveliest lies of all. So what if the happy ending we just saw was all lies? And it's like, yeah, what if the moon was made of pudding? What if everything was a dying coma dream? And what if what if the Rugrats kids are dead? Yeah, I know. I've seen the subreddits, I know. But the thing is, there is that ambiguity, because like everything we've seen has been so strange and so sort of like dream logic, folktale logic, Inferno logic, all kind of tangled up together. And so you end up with this thing that just exists as what it is, so strongly what it is, despite being made of so many other things, that I think it's really interesting. And I don't know, if this is something that has also been living rent-free in your brain for whatever reason, I would advise giving it a watch or a rewatch, because I think it's fascinating and also just plain fun.
Strongly what it is, I think, is a really good word, because what I was thinking of as you were explaining was like, this show is so confident in what it is, and it lays down a lot of ideas extremely confidently.
Yeah.
The tone is weird, but perfectly cohesive throughout.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the stuff that they are willing to do, the kind of bombardment of this weird vignette of random shit happening that sets up all of the different things we're going to run into over the course of the show at the very beginning, doing the little underwater, blah, blah, blah at the beginning before we even get into the woods.
Yeah.
The frog playing piano.
Yep.
So many of the choices in the show are absolutely wacky. And the tone is so out there, but it is played, I don't want to necessarily say it's played perfectly straight, but it is played honestly, without any hint of irony or sarcasm, or, oh, look how stupid this is. It's like, this is the world they're in.
Yep.
This is what's going on. Greg's a weird little guy. Wirt is very in his feelings.
Yeah.
Let's go. And the confidence to do that is the same confidence that the team uses to pull so many ideas from different places and put it into one extremely well-mixed soup or smoothie or any other emulsion of choice. It's a confidence in storytelling. I guess if we want to go back to the good artist borrow, great artist steal, it's not about stealing or borrowing, it's about confidence.
Yeah.
And I think this show is confident and has the sauce to back it up. A lot of times we see stories that are very confident and very, oh boy. But this is confident and masterful, which is not a very rare combination, but a very potent one when you get it.
Yes, definitely. It's noteworthy, I would say. And yeah, I hope I successfully made my point that while there is Inferno in this show, and that is cool, it is by far not the coolest thing about this show. And there's a whole like meta-narrative conversation to be had about like how you can interleave something into your story. Take another story and use it as foundations for your story and still create something that is very much your own.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just a conversation I keep seeing getting relitigated in creative spaces about like what even is originality at this point, and like what's an okay thing to borrow from and what isn't, and what's an okay way to borrow things and what isn't. And I don't have all the answers, but I think some of them might be hiding in here. So that's about all I had. Bye. How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves as autumn colors fall, dancing in a swirl of golden memories, the loveliest